Olá a todos, estamos em mais uma sessão do nosso podcast, no nosso segundo encontro Uro-Onco Rio. Queria dar as boas-vindas a todos. Eu sou Rodrigo Vieiralves, estou com nossa colega aqui, Bárbara, também colega urologista brasileira de Manaus. O tópico do nosso encontro aqui agora é a pesquisa clínica como forma de promover o acesso à cooperação internacional. Queria agradecer a iniciativa da SBURJ, de trazer esse tema, um tema tão importante, Eu entendo que justamente por conta da pesquisa científica, todos nós estamos aqui em conjunto hoje. Preciso aqui apresentar os nossos convidados aqui de grande nome internacional quando a gente pensa em pesquisa científica. Professor Bertrand Tombal, que é professor de urologia na Universidade Catholique de Louvain, e é o chairman da divisão de urologia na Clínica Universitaire Saint-Luc, em Bruxelas, na Bélgica. Também aqui estou com o professor Pedro Barata, um prazer estar aqui também com o professor Pedro, que é da Case Western, em Ohio, eu acho, Pedro, nos Estados Unidos. E é também o diretor de pesquisa clínica de urologia no serviço de programa de pesquisa. Então, para nós é um prazer ter vocês aqui, acho que o que eu trouxe aqui, no número, a gente conhece vocês, sabe o número de publicações. Então, essa é uma mesa de peso que eu e a Bárbara, certamente, a gente tem muita honra de estar aqui com vocês hoje. Como a gente está num podcast que a gente tem convidados internacionais, a gente vai mudar agora, tá? A gente está falando em português e a partir de então, toda a nossa conversa aqui vai ser em inglês. Vou passar para a Bárbara para dar o segmento.
Well, I would like to thank you very much for being here with us today. It's a truly honor to have you both here. You are great names worldwide in the clinical research, and that's what we're going to talk about a little bit today. We know clinical trials it's a powerful tool to advance oncology, to expand access, and I would like you both to talk about what's the role of clinical research in advancing oncology worldwide.
Go ahead, you go first.
So when you speak about clinical trial, you have to make a difference between two forms of clinical trial, okay? The one people know the most, this is because this where there is more resource, is to come with new drugs, okay? So you have that idea of, Pedro was mentioning the PARP inhibitor in metastatic hormone-naive prostate cancer, but there will be a trial comparing the standard of care plus a new drug, okay? Then that leads to registration. That's a very highly regulated world with, FDA, EMA, whatever. That's a super important world because without this clinical trial, we would not have the new drug. But I like to say it's 50% of the job, okay? Because when you have this drug, you need to learn how to use them. And a good example, I'm going to take the world of the metastatic hormone-naive prostate cancer, is that we give this drug, let's take, enzalutamide, and then we know if you have metastatic prostate cancer, we're going to give you androgen deprivation therapy and enzalutamide. Okay, we do it, but then what? How do we optimize the treatment? Is it the right dose? Should we stop the treatment at a certain point? How do we monitor this patient? And then you have only two ways. Either everybody has his own kind of solution. You can have consensus like APCCC, but it's a consensus. Or you can leverage academic clinical trial to answer this important question. And that's where very, very few countries, I would say maybe the US, and still not even with the biggest question, or the UK maybe have the ability to do it alone. So if we want to leverage this kind of clinical trial, we're going to need international collaboration first. Second, we have not to fall into the trap to say, oh, we're going to do the trial the same way the industry did the trial. No, we have to come with a modern way of doing the trial, closest to the finishing, kind of pragmatic trial. So yes, clinical trial is super important because basically once you have a new drug, you need how to learn it. And it's the same for treatment, combination surgery, radiotherapy. So clinical trial is important. Otherwise, we treat patients based on our own feeling.
Right. So fantastic way to start this topic. The way I see studies, so studies change the way we treat people, right? We a lot of times we can share our thoughts, our opinions on things, but we need data. We need to show why doing A or B or C helps patients compared to not doing that. So a clinical study is an intervention. It can be in the drug development process. You happen that the intervention is a new therapy, as Dr. Tombal alluded to. But as a medical oncologist surrounded by urologists, several important trials are trying to answer a question where the intervention is not a drug, but it's actually a surgery or radiation therapy or some form of non-therapeutic, if you will, or non-pharmacological intervention. So that's also clinical trial. So things like kidney cancer, the role of cytoreductive nephrectomy for patients with advanced renal cell carcinoma is an important question. It needs to be addressed. It's not necessarily involving a drug. So why do we ask questions? And perhaps that's one of the most important things. There are several components of the clinical trial that we really need to excel. One is the question. We really need to understand the disease to ask questions that need to be answered, and we don't have an answer for it. So the question is truly important. The type of questions we ask depends who asks them, right? If you go to academia, if you go to cooperative groups, URTC, SWOG, Brazilian, LACOG, certainly you've noticed that the type of questions you're trying to answer in a clinical trial is different if you compare them to sponsor 1, 2, or 3. So we need to recognize that. The type of questions we try to answer depends on who's asking the question. The other aspect is this interventional or this collaboration at the international level. To be fair, you Brazilians have done a remarkable job. To my understanding, you're able to partner in Europe with URTC, with Dr. Tombal and many others in a very effective way. And that's quite remarkable. I'm thinking of P3, for example, where I'm under the impression you guys came late to the game, right? And you're actually able to enroll about a third of the trial, something like that, 140 patients, if I remember correctly, which, by the way, was an important question. Combination of two drugs that were both available compared to an RPI alone. So from that perspective, I'm pretty sure that with that experience, that allowed you guys to get closer. You learn more about the European sites and the European investigators. The European investigators learn a lot more about the Brazilian sites and the Brazilian investigators. So it's a natural next step to collaborate more. And the next trial, I'm pretty sure URTC is going to think of asking help from Brazil to accomplish the answer to the important questions that are being asked. So, and finally, for patients, we have a fantastic regulatory process in regards to ethics, right? We all know that I might have a great idea, but if my design is not ethically acceptable, it's not going to happen. And thank God for that. So we have these, checks and balances to make sure that we conduct that research in an ethically acceptable way. The reason why it's important is because you have the guarantee that, the standard of care, the current approach is the ethical way of addressing patients, and we're doing something new that potentially can be better. So the data shows overwhelmingly that patients enrolled in clinical trials always do better. And they do better for many reasons. They do better because everybody's paying more attention to it. They do better because you control what's going on with the disease in a much closer range. So, when we involve in randomization, that's a big myth that, patients might not get access to innovation, but actually patients on clinical studies do better. So clinical studies, in my view, is the best way to treat patients around the world. There's many barriers to that, and that's our job to try to minimize those barriers as much as possible. And certainly we cannot have all the studies we would like in each center. However, it's really important that we raise awareness for the important studies out there, because it helps institutions, it helps investigators, but ultimately, and perhaps most importantly, it does help patients. So it's a huge component of what we do in daily basis is actually have trials available to us, our site, across the street, or sometimes across the ocean, and beautiful collaborations come from that. And so that's an amazing thing for us.
Great. And how you said there are different kinds of clinical trials, and we have to do international collaboration. I remember last year at ASCO GU, we had a great talk, about a 30 minutes talk about diversity in these clinical trials. So in Brazil, I have to say, because the Southeast is, I think it's the most developed academic centers are here in the Southeast, but I live in the North. So in the North, it's totally different. We have a very big country, great disparities. So how can we minimize it, and how can we help this diversity for the clinical trials?
But that's one of the hottest topic now, is how can you secure that you include equal proportion of different people in trial. The first trial, to me, because otherwise the problem, if you launch an international collaboration, usually you will open US first, then Europe second, and then the rest of the world. And if you don't pay attention, 75% of the patient will come from the US, 20 from Europe, and 5%. So we pay now a lot of attention with that, and basically we try to make contract and say, okay, one of the advantages working, example with Laycock would be that we want to increase the contingency of patients from Latin America, so that in the end we have enough patients. Look in the U.S., for instance, all this discussion about African American, is it different? Why you have those discussions is because there was not enough attention to increase that contingency in the clinical trial, and then you realize suddenly you have a great drug, you have a great treatment, and there's only 10% of patients with African descendants. So that's one of the advantages, that you can really map the diversity. So that's a good thing. You can also get access to rare disease. For instance, the latest clinical trial in testis cancer is TIGER. So it's TIGER is a salvage treatment in testis cancer, which is sponsored by Movember. So very rapidly, Movember realized that if you want to do a large scale, you have to go abroad. So we did the trial with the US. And these big trials, they are also, because they make not only the treatment of the patient, the care pathway advance, but they also make clinical trial advancing itself. Because collaboration, there is not a book for collaboration. There is not a book that says this is how you should collaborate. I'm going to give you a precise example. When you would do an academic trial for which NCI in the US was the primary sponsor, you had to apply JC criteria in European Center. Some have, but other they use another provider. So technically that was not possible, and the US would be inflexible and say, TIGER, it has been like this for 25 years. With TIGER and Movember, meaning the patient pushing behind, it has vanished. For the first time, NCI say, no, okay, you do the trial in Europe, we only want to be sure that you use some kind of recognized accreditation process, because we want quality insurance, but we don't want to impose yours. So it means that not only, it's kind of a catch-22. The more clinical trial you do, the easiest it is.
Right.
Like the first trial with Laycock was the most difficult, because we had to understand the Brazil environment, the payer, so you get access to the drug, what you have to do, what about ethics, what about patient profile. The second one will maybe still a little bit difficult, but then it's going to fly. So you not only, the more clinical trial you do, and it's the same for a doctor who say, I would like to participate to clinical trial. The first 5 patients, that's going to be hell, because he's going to have to do his accreditation, and then it is going to become like in country, like if you ask to a UK medical oncologist, what is the standard of care for metastatic hormone-naive prostate cancer? The answer is to put the patient in Stampede. That's really when that's when you hit the goal, meaning that every patient not only is treated, but is making you learn on the next patient. And that's really the kind of goal we should achieve, is that the vast majority of patients which are in the gray zone, instead of doing what we believe, they would end up in clinical trial. That's take time, but with EMR, AI, electronic exchange. That's going to be one day possible.
Yeah,
Great.
I agree. I'm just thinking, philosophically, why do we want disparities, right? Why do we want that? That means difference, basically, right? Patients are different. Patients and diseases come from different people who have different racial differences, who might or might not be linked to biological differences, right? So whether you're not to believe it's a social construct or not, they are biological differences that perhaps explain how tumors can behave in a different way. And at the end of the day, again, we want to develop data that supports our decisions in daily life, in clinical practice, to help people. So if we have patients with different background, biological background or molecular defined background, we understand that the same disease behaves in a different way in different populations. There's abundant data in the United States regarding African Americans as well that, it appears clear that the activity of therapies, chemotherapy, immunotherapy like sickle cell T, or even ARPIs, appears the same, if not that better, in the African American population compared to Caucasians. Now, one might argue, is that just that? Is that the race, or are there biological differences for that? So the sense that we recognize that although we are one world and we're all humans, there are differences that perhaps can explain how tumors can behave and cancers can behave in a different way. So I think disparities is the acknowledgement of our our effort to understand 100% of the cancer, and understanding cancer means we see that doesn't behave all the time in the same way. So based on that, it's very complex as you can start, because when do you start the disparities part, right? What is enough for you to consider you have a balance between all the different groups? By the way, there are infinite number of groups. You're going to go by age, you're going to go by, sex or gender, you're going to go by race. How do you define race? How many races you want to include? And by the way, what's the proportion? What is enough? Is it 20%? Is it 25%? Is it 50%? Right? How many Brazilians we have to include in a phase 3 trial to make it, to accept that as representative of the Brazilian population, if you also talk about Europeans, and by the way, are all the Europeans the same? And you talk about the Americans, and you talk about the Africans, you talk about Asian patients. So it's a complex topic. So how do you figure this out? Well, the more you know, it helps, but a lot of it comes from consensus among experts in the world who come up to an agreement about what is considered sufficient to at least know more than we knew up to that point. And then you start coming up with creative ways of trying to balance that. Collaborations is a way to do that, right? Obviously, you cannot include Brazilians in a large phase 3 trial unless you work with Brazil. And it helps if you guys organize within groups like LACOG, because you basically have a structure, an organized structure that helps to execute that plan. But the vision and the plan has to come first. Right, and so from that, and the other aspect, one other thing you can do is actually say, you know what, we need at least X% of patients represented from this particular area or geographic region of the world. And actually we see a lot of trials where we have these caps or minimum requirement number of patients justifying, and the reason for that is basically the fact that we're trying to do our best to develop data that reflects the heterogeneity of the disease. And you can do it in different ways, but I think you have to, because again, we're all humans, but cancer is incredibly complex. And we realized a long time ago that there's a role on that complexity has to do with the differences of the underlying body that where the cancer develops. So I think it's a complex story. I think we learn as we go, and I agree the process gets more efficient as it goes. And I think even the cutoffs for representation in different population changes over time as we learn more. So it's an example how research and is something that it's not the one thing. It's not a law. It actually changes over time, and that reflects our understanding, our learning of the process as well as we go.
Yeah.
Perfect. And so, as you can see, the international cooperation is important for validate results around the world. And one little story I would like to tell you, it's my father is also a urologist, and back in 90s, he was invited to work in the Viagra research, And at that point, we here in Brazil, we are not really able to do research, so was a huge opportunity to learn how to do clinical research. And one thing I would like to ask you is if you think there is a whole of the societies, like Brazilian societies, European societies, to promote this cooperation?
Oh yeah, that's clear. It's clear that basically the what I call the professional society, like EAU, Brazilian society, they have a corporate responsibility, and it's very interesting to see that when the top management of this society lose the interest in research, very rapidly the society deteriorate, because then they're just discussing of what they do. I can see that, for instance, with EAU, which for a few years was really not at all into this research. So it became like a syndicate of the urologists, claiming fight against the radiation oncologists, the medical oncologists. And we had a new generation of leader, people like James Hendow, who was with very big name into real world evidence, or people like Arnold Stenzel, the chairman, which is somebody which has a deep academic background, and very rapidly you see that they are actually the primary act to say, okay, every single patient in every single center should to some extent contribute to clinical trial. Doesn't have to be in a PARP inhibitor plus radium phase 3 trial. No. Can be simply by collecting your data, put them in a form they can be transformed, apply quality insurance so we can see how you monitor your practice. And so, to me, what is the definition of clinical trial? The definition of a clinical trial is that you keep track on the data, you secure that they are through, complete and in good quality, and you put yourself in a situation where you are ready to give them to somebody who asks them. That's the start. Today, you realize that if you say, like, I will take very something simple, the rate of erectile dysfunction after prostatectomy, and you take a country like Belgium, okay, we have 33 robots, we have in the 33 robot center, maybe 3 use quality of life questionnaire to measure their erection. Where EAU is promoting is to say, no, if like at some point we would like to know what is the erectile dysfunction rate at 6 months, everybody's in a position that it can send us data. That's where clinical trial. The rest, like Pedro said, the rest then is the secret of the clinical trial is not the question. The question, there are many questions. We are there the number one is the quality of the question, but the second is the quality of the data. If you have a great question but nobody to give you data, your question will be an answer. And I think that society, professional society, play an important role into, aiding the fact that every patient should be a small clinical trial. At least we should get minimal set of data. We tried that. We tried with Movember, and we published in European Urology kind of minimal data set that should be collected by everybody. That is your contribution to clinical trial, and trust me, that is already a very, very big contribution. And yes, this society have an important role in promoting that.
Yeah, I think we all play a role in that. Societies are made of people. I couldn't agree more. If you take the innovation part of it, right, the research, was looking ahead, looking forward, you are left with, we're debating what we can do and cannot do, it's our rights, and that's not good. So I think in general, as humans, the more we look ahead in the future and spend less time about, bitching about what's not good, right, we're lost as a society. So pushing forward is a way to go. We learn from what we've done, what got us here, but always with the perspective of the future. So a different way to kind of say the same thing is every patient that we treat should be another opportunity for us to learn, not for my team and my place, but for the world to learn. because we can learn from each other. We don't need to learn just from what we do. We can learn from what others do. And by the way, that's how we teach our kids, right? We teach them, hopefully they'll learn from their mistakes, but also from others' mistakes, so they don't have to go through the same thing. And I say all of us play a role. So for instance, I'm trying to launch a little collaboration with an institution in Brazil. I'm sure Dr. Tombal is creating many collaborations with many places around the world. Ironman is a big effort, prostate cancer registry, 5,000 men around the world, sponsored by, among other things, Prostate Cancer Foundation and Movember. So we are seeing that, right? Because I think people recognize that we should take the opportunity to learn from every single patient coming to see us with cancer. In this case, GU cancers. We're talking a little bit more prostate cancer, maybe kidney, bladder cancer, but Ironman is a prostate cancer registry. So if you see it from that perspective, we can learn from what we're doing at our own place. We can do it from what we're doing friendly institutions we're working more closely with, but also from what other people are doing well in other places of the world, whether it's Brazil, Portugal, United States, Belgium, or who else in the world. So it's our collaborative effort for us to say, you know what, we need to get better. Let's think of the future. And all of us are starting these collaborations, this way to get good data, good quality of data. Can we learn from it, always with our mind in the future?
And I really, really hope that what we're talking here, this podcast, reach many people, many healthcare professionals, because we have to do better in the basics, just like knowing how to make a patient, how you say, a lesson. And in healthcare in Brazil is kind of different. It's different everywhere, but in Brazil we have the public healthcare system and the private care system, and it's very different from US. It's almost everybody in private sector, and it's different from Europe. It's almost everybody in public healthcare. In Brazil, we see clinical trials as well as an important bridge to make these patients have access to new treatments, because unfortunately there are great disparities in what we can offer in the private and in the public health system. So it allows these patients to access new treatments. So, and at the same time, it's where we spend, I guess, less time seeing the patients. I don't know about your practice, but in my practice, I don't work in public practice here. So it's difficult for us to have access to all of this. So how can we actually make the access easier to these patients? Because access is something, it's a really, really big issue in Brazil. So
yeah, but that's where there's somebody, because so far we discuss of two stakeholders. We discuss about the doctor and the patient. That is where we need a third one, which is the system itself. Okay. And to explain that you can actually leverage the quality of the care, not having to increase the expenditure. The problem first is that we have to explain that clinical trial make you, because like Pedro say, in the end, the patient are better, they have less complication, you save money, okay? So with EORTC, we've been working with several countries, not only in Europe. We went, for instance, in Southeast Asia, and we're doing no de-escalation trial where we give a treatment for 6 months and then we stop it. And we say, okay, if you give access to the patient to the drug, but in this condition, when you're using a reduced dose, there could be a win-win. There could be a win-win between you, because you actually show that you care for your people because you give them access. The money is not wasted because it's in a very controlled environment. And it's very surprising, like some countries, like I can't quote the country, but like we have a very big country in the Middle East, we say, okay, we're going to open all the de-escalation trial in the public system. And but we want the trial, we just want to pay for the drug. So we want the trial to really mimic the standard of care which is in public. So we had to go and take the example to be exact, like it's a reduced dose of an AR pathway inhibitor. You're not going to measure testosterone every 3 months. Honestly, it's useless. You're not going to measure creatinine, you know. So we really went on site, see, okay, what can they afford in the public system? What is the standard of care in the public system? We mimic that, and we say, okay, the only thing we want you to pay is for a reduced dose of the drug. They say yes. And doing so, you can change a little bit the system. But indeed, using academic trial or using pragmatic trial to increase the level of the quality in public system. For instance, we have a lot of collaboration for breast cancer in India, okay? Because in India, you know, it's also, you have, because here in Brazil, you have a private and a public system.
Okay.
In India, you have a private and a no system. So it's even, you know, here people have a minimum requirement of care. In India, they may have just nothing. And working with big institutions like the Tata Institution, who have a charity part, although they probably, we could show that you can do exactly what you say, is meaning like, let's use clinical trial to increase the access to the public, and at the same time gaining more knowledge on the global thing. That is a long process, difficult process. The European Union, for instance, is pretty much into this. It's very difficult to get country like the US, for instance, because the rate of the proportion of patients who have a minimal coverage is quite high. And then you have the problem that government change all the time. So, but it is clear that you know the big five. The big five, it's Brazil, China, India, Turkey, and I will forget. So these are the called unregulated systems. So meaning system with an extremely good private sector, and beside that a public. And many organizations say these are the places we should go to show that you can actually have an affordable system in the public as well, and use clinical trial as a way to leverage that.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, so the description about the system is very important, right? The systems are very different around the world. I had the luxury of the opportunity of practicing different systems. Portuguese system, you know, I checked the Spanish system as well in the United States now, and they're very different indeed, as you guys describing. But I think what Dr. Tombal described it here is an opportunity, even in the public system, SUS here in Brazil. They are some type of research that can be done in systems like this. You actually have figured it out already. De-intensification treatments, everything that is about optimization of the delivery of the interventions. So one thing is you come up with a new intervention that's better than what you're doing up to that point. That's one type of research. But the other one is, can you actually optimize that intervention? Does everybody needs it this way? And those modifications or regimen or scheduled modifications around the drug or interventions already available are perhaps ways that public systems can do. And I think LACOG is doing that already, actually. If you look at the research, the list of studies within the LACOG portfolio, it's not a coincidence that you see a lot of those questions being asked. Aren't they important? They are crucial. We want personalization of the interventions. We know not everybody benefits the same way. And by the way, who do we expect to answer those questions? Perhaps us, who are in clinical practice and understand exactly that not everybody has the same delta or a magnitude of benefit. So there are opportunities, including the systems who are more frail, to answer that. Now, I'm not naive. I don't think we can change the system per se, but we can be advocates for that. And you guys do that quite well, right? A lot of you in Brazil, to my understanding, actually touch both systems. Touch the private system, touch the public system. So you do have a big advocacy role that you play in your country. Meetings like this, that puts pressure, that raises awareness in the social media, in the community domain, in public domain. And that pressure is important because the society pressure goes back to people who organize the system to try to get it better. Ultimately, why do we have health care? We have health care because we have one dream, that people will live at their fullest. Now we recognize that we don't have that the same way around the world, right? And we have the specifics of each country that are very different. And so it's very hard to harmonize that. But the goal is always the same. All the systems, all the people in the world want people to live at their best. So with that in mind, there's a role for advocacy, and there's certainly a role for certain types of research that can still be done in systems that are perhaps not as rich or more challenging to work with, but don't minimize the responsibility and also the potential that you can to change the world the way we see it, also with studies like that.
Well, I've been to Memorial for my research fellow, and what's very different from what we do in Brazil is that usually in these big academic centers in US, and I'm not sure about Europe, they have protected time to do research, and we just don't have it here in Brazil. It's unfortunately, I don't know anywhere where we have protect time to do it, and it's important. And at Memorial we have integrated a randomization integrated to the daily routine to make it easier. So how can we make it easier? Because sometimes we listen to it a lot. I'm not doing research. It's a lot time consuming. It's a lot of worries. We don't have a team to do it. But there are many of us that are really engaged to it and make an effort. So how can we do it easier? I don't know if I can ask that, but you are great researchers. So how can we make it easier?
That's something we are working a lot, and this is the concept of pragmatic trial, meaning that the problem when you do research is that you are basically for doing the simple thing. Okay, so let's take an example, neoadjuvant to bladder, and you want to you're going to get durvalumab, you're going to give chemo and durvalumab. Okay, that's your everyday routine. And you may be in a system where there is an EMR and he's going to collect basic question. The problem is what? The problem is that we say, okay, Barbara, we would like you to try 2 cycles of durvalumab and no 4 cycles. You're going to say, oh yes, I'm interested by the ID. But why are you going to refuse? You're going to refuse because you're going to realize that to do that important, simple question, we're going to add a huge workload. And we do estimate that workload to 30% of your daily activity. So meaning, suddenly we're going to ask you to contribute, but we're going to put a lot of resource on top of you. Then you're going to say, I don't have the time. Then you're going to go see your administration. We're going to see, I don't have the money. So the only way to sort that out, and big organizations are working a lot on this, is to reduce that workload to the top, really to the top, to say, no, do nothing. Just we agree that when you see the patient, you're not going to forget to take the blood pressure, for instance, something you do, and that you keep it somewhere. So if we want to reach that point, and in Europe we have created what we call the Medicine Cancer Forum, where really we are working to see how can we reduce the workload to the extreme, okay? I think that with computerization, which EMR are you? I'm on Epic.
Epic.
Yeah, so we're both on Epic. I mean, Epic, you can run a clinical trial with a patient that is randomized, and for you, it doesn't change anything to your practice. Because you see the patient, or are you, tac, right. You have the side effect, that's it. So I had the same activity. But in the background, there is a clinical trial which is running. So I think that, and that's where also that's the role of organization like us. We have to know that if we want to offer a trial to LECOQ, it doesn't have to be with 30% additional workload. Otherwise, they're going to say no. So that's a very important work.
I agree fully. And by the way, this is also happening on the American side, right? Actually, the lung cancer study is called Pragmatica, exactly to that point, right? They minimize the number of variables that needed to be collected. I agree, as things get better, probably EMR is going to help that. AI within embedded within the EMRs that we use. It's quite impressive. Belgium and Cleveland, we're using the same EMR. Think about it.
Yeah.
Just think about it, what this means. I mean, the two sides of the world using the same electronic medical system. That's really impressive. So that's where we're going. So, but we'll go at different paces, right? I think we recognize, and that's your point. I mean, I'm not sure I'm the best person to say, because when I left Portugal because I felt the energy I was spending in a day, I had small results. So I was spending a lot of energy, so I was very inefficient. I was spending a lot of energy at nights and over the weekends, which I know you all do, to achieve, to walk 1 meter, let's say, right? And in the US, I spend the same amount of energy and I'm able to walk 1 kilometer, right? So it's not that I spend less energy or I work less. That's not the point. The point is I'm far more efficient. And the systems, but that speaks to the system that I had where I work was more inefficient than the system that I currently work. I don't think we're going to get to the point, at least certainly not in 5 or 10 years, where all our systems are equally efficient. So I agree with Dr. Tombal, and he says, listen, the pragmatic view is, sure, if we get to the point where everybody's 100% efficient, then we made it. We made it. But until then, we're not going to wait until that day to actually start doing research, are we? So we have to work with what we have. And the way to work with what we have is to simplify the process so that you made it available to more people. So I don't know the answer, how you're going to get the systems to convince or to tell them that, listen, I really need not to see patients 5 times a week and maybe less. I know that's been a request, by many. Some places within these countries have figured it out already. So there are some clinical trial centers in many countries where you'll be surprised their time, because it's such a lucrative approach, because they figured it out how to actually have an ROI by investing in clinical research. It can be a lucrative business. They actually have figured it out. They are saving some time for you to do things in addition to seeing patients. So including in countries where we would say that's not possible. I just think that will take more or less time depending where you are. Perhaps for SUS will be different than it is for the private system you have in Brazil, and that might be different in Portugal, might be different in Belgium, that might be different in the VA system in the United States, or the net scale hospitals that are able to take care of uninsured patients. So I think it's complicated. We're going to go at different paces, but I agree, simplifying the process is how we can do today to make a change while we don't get to the point where we're already at the top. And we all play a different role, but the goal is the same. It's just we play it in a different way.
We are running out of time. We have only 1 more minute. I'm leaving with the message that clinical research can make researchers together and also improve assistance. But I would like to ask one more question. What a piece of advice you could give to young urologists that like to cooperate in researchers?
Stay interested.
Perfect.
That's the only thing. I mean, it's a matter of survival, because medicine is changing so fast that if you focus without seeing what's the future, you're gonna usually when I was young, it would take 25 years to get old. Now it takes 5 years to go something. So keep reading, stay interested, and that's enough.
I'm going to add one more thing in addition to the motivation. I think as time goes by, and the 20-year-old Pedro wouldn't see life like this. I do see it now. Maybe I'll see it even better. In life, we need to have a vision. We need to know where we're going. Whether it's motivation, we need to know why we're doing what we're doing. Not everybody's fit to actually do research the way we phrase it today, although there are many angles of looking at that. So I agree, knowing what you're good at, what makes you happy when you wake up in the morning, that's probably what you want to do more. So, but I'm going to say it's harder to collaborate with people that you don't know. So do your best to network. Be smart, know the disease. It's always easier to ask good questions when you know what you're talking about. Always easier, but always matters. We are people at the end of the day, so we like to know each other. We trust people that we know. It's harder to trust a machine because we don't know what that means. So I think in addition to be motivated and interested, I would say do your best to network, to to present yourself, introduce yourself to others who are doing something similar, or would you like to collaborate? And you'll be surprised by how generous people in this field are. So go out there, meet people, hopefully you'll know the disease, so you'll ask good questions. People love that. People who want to work, smart, ask good questions, and then collaborate.
Well, I would really like to thank you both for being here. It was truly an honor to have you here with
Thank
us.
you.
And I'm pretty sure that everybody who will watch the podcast will learn a lot from your experience. Thank you.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.